I'm Congressman Ted Lieu, and thank you so much for joining for this live town hall on the census. And I'm so honored to be joined today by Santa Monica Councilwoman Kristen McCowan, Malibu Councilwoman Karen Farrer, and Stephen Ochoa of MALDEF. And you're going to hear a wide-ranging discussion about the census, how important it is, and why you need to fill it out, and make sure your family and friends do as well. If you look at the census, it is a huge tool that the federal government uses to allocate resources to local communities, and it affects our communities for 10 years. And what the studies show is even if there is just a 1% undercount, the CA-33 communities in the congressional district could lose over $400,000. And this affects everything from class sizes to public safety to healthcare. So this is critically important that we make sure everyone fills out their census and then gets their family and friends to do so. In terms of the census process, we're nearing the end of when you can submit their forms. So it's very urgent that people fill out their census forms. And my congressional district, which runs from Malibu in the north, south through Santa Monica, all the way to Palos Verdes along the coast, does not right now reach the state average in terms of census responses. So we're trying to increase the census responses of everyone in this district, and we don't want to have any undercount if we can avoid it. In addition to resources, the census also affects your political representation. So if there is an undercount, then the state of California could lose one congressional seat, and if the undercount is very bad, it could lose up to 2 congressional seats. So there's a lot at stake, and I'm so honored to be joined by the 3 participants we have with us today. So I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll ask questions and answers. And thank you all for participating. So Kristen, if you want to go ahead and give her introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen McCowan. I'm the newest council member in the city of Santa Monica. It's a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about the census. As someone who has definitely benefited from the census and the funding that it brings to our community, I look forward to speaking about the ways in which we can drive up participation in Santa Monica. So thanks for having me. Thank you, Kristen.
And Karen?
Hi, thanks so much, Ted. My name is Karen Farrer. I am a council member of the city of Malibu. I was elected in the fall of 2018 and served off the bat as mayor pro tem and then as mayor, and now have the position of council member. I too am trying to boost our census participation in Malibu. It is definitely below average, and we would very much like to get the message out, continue to get this message out, that we need more responses. Thanks so much.
And Stephen?
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Stephen Ochoa. I am MALDEF's National Redistricting Coordinator. MALDEF was founded in 1967, and we call ourselves the law firm of the Latino community. MALDEF has been active in representation and political and participation issues since its founding over 50 years ago. And one of our areas of expertise at this point is compliance with, the census and political representation. And so I am happy to talk about the importance of the census to representation, to minority representation, and its importance just as a foundation of our American society. Thank you, Congressman, for having me, and looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you. Before I ask questions, let me first give out some very basic information. If you have not filled out the census, or if you know someone who has not, please go to the following website, www.2020census.gov. So that's www.2020census.gov, or you can call the following phone number, 844-330-2020. And so the first question I have is for Stephen. I know that some folks may fear filling out the census because of privacy issues, or they're not sure where the information will be disclosed. can you tell us about all their safeguards with the census and how that information is used?
Absolutely. So first, I'll answer the second question first, Congressman. What is the information used for? Census is important for three primary areas. It's important for representation. So it is first used for apportionment, which is how states are allocated the number of seats in the state and the U.S. House of Representatives. It is used for redistricting. So any jurisdiction that has districts to elect their representatives will have to redistrict. So therefore, if you think about your city, your state, your county, if you have districts, if after 10 years, you know, some areas grow, some areas don't, demographics within it change, but every 10 years they have to be reset back to equal population, which is a primary principle of American democracy. And so this is used for representation on every level of government. And third, the census is important because it's also used in many funding distribution formulas. So programs such as just Medicaid, SNAP, housing, Section 8, are just some examples of programs that use census data to determine allocations to jurisdictions, small cities, school districts, states, what have you. So as you can see, a lot of it, just from describing what the census is used for, should give you an idea of why it is so important to participate. Because just think of it just from your neighborhood. If you want your fair share of representation and or funding, that is, where the census is a primary determiner, it's just even thinking about that is important. Why you need to participate and fill out this form.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, for example, with the Cures Act that Congress passed on bipartisan basis, we also did have money in there distributed to local cities. Santa Monica, for example, got $1,140,000 from the Cures Act, and that was calculated basically based on the census from the last time this was done. And so, Kristen, can you tell me what efforts Santa Monica is engaged in to try to get people to fill out the census?
Yeah, so specifically recently, like everyone else, with the rush to get this done by September 30th, which is unfortunately cutting it a little bit shorter than we'd hoped, we've been pushing out at the city significant additional social media. We have census information running in every ad that we're doing or anything that the city is pushing out to residents. As of right now, I believe we're at about 66% self-reporting on the census. And compared to 2010, where we were at 69%, that's a significant loss in potential revenue to the city. Some areas in our city, like our downtown area, is even lower than that, with only 49% self-reporting. So we're really pushing out information in all the ways that we can during COVID to try to stimulate responses. I know personally, I've seen a number of census takers walking the streets, going door to door. I've even heard from residents that they've filled out online and then they are getting those follow-ups that we know happen. And so I just want to remind people, do not be afraid of the follow-ups. That's a good sign. People are out there. We're really trying to get our numbers in. And just, you mentioned the CARES Act, and I know that in Santa Monica alone, we were able to keep 400 residents in their homes due to COVID related rental assistance, and that's federal funding. And with, approximately 10.7% of our population currently living below the federal poverty line, we need this support. Oftentimes people think of Santa Monica as a super affluent city by the sea, and it's a global city and an iconic landmark and a tourist attraction, devastated obviously in many ways by COVID. We are all of those things, and we have disproportionate wealth in this city. And what we don't want to do is forget about people who oftentimes are forgotten. So it's critical that every single person in Santa Monica fill out their census. And I'd love to see us surpass that 69% number from 2010.
Thank you, Kristen. And Karen, the same question to you. What are Malibu's efforts to get people to fill out the census, and how's it going?
Thank you, Congressman. We have taken a multi-pronged approach for the last, I would say, several months. We have been doing consistent social media messaging on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We've been doing our own original posts as well as reposting the Census Bureau messages. We've had information on our city website, e-notifications, both text and email to a subscriber list of 2,400 people in our small city of 13,000. We've been on Nextdoor. We've been advertising in both of our local papers, the Malibu Times and the Malibu Surfside News. We have put messages on our city TV channel, on our local radio station, which is called KBOO 99.1. Our mayor has been recording messages and putting them on Instagram and Facebook. And we've been making recordings on our city hotline and sending out in the mail both flyers and putting up posters. So we're trying as many approaches as possible, both high tech and low tech. And sadly, our response is still low, but we're going to keep pushing for the next 9 days.
And Congressman Lieu, if I could just add one more thing that we're doing that I think is an interesting way to sort of push information out. Since we've reopened curbside pickup at our libraries, we're sending home information on the census in every library book and every encounter that people have, which for families especially is beneficial. And like Councilmember Farrer said, I forgot to mention it, but we are running ads on KCRW and in our local papers. And we're continuing to push the message on our city websites and in all the posts going out. And our neighborhood associations also, I've noticed, are also pushing out a lot of information to local neighborhoods.
Thank you, Kristen. And just as a reminder, this is all the different areas the census impacts: schools, hospitals, infrastructure, public transportation, housing, homeless services, firefighting, and community development, and the list goes on. So again, if you have not filled out the census, or if you know someone that has not, please go to www.2020census.gov, or you can call the following phone number: 844-330-2020. So Stephen, there are some people who may still be confused about the census question. So first of all, is there a citizenship question? So is there a citizenship question on the census? And second, people who are undocumented, should they be counted? If you could answer those two questions.
Absolutely. And let me also add, I believe that Congressman, at least the census webpage is my2020census.gov for people to fill out the form. And the correct number of 844-330-2020. At least it's the.
You can go. Yes, you go to both
Great.
websites.
Yes, absolutely. So options, everyone, options. So this census has been the most litigated census in U.S. history. And it really started as Congressman, as you alluded to this concept of a citizenship question. So the current administration tried to add a question of, are you a citizen or not, on the census form that everyone receives. And this is something that, is basically, it was done in a way to suppress census response rates. One of the most vulnerable populations in our country are immigrants, citizen or, not documented or not. And so this question is very invasive, and it's, it was an attempt to basically discourage those type of communities, which particularly impact the Latino and Asian American communities, from participating in the census. And again, the census counts everyone, man, woman, child, citizen, and non-citizen alike. And it is confidential. There are actually severe penalties for any Census Bureau staff member to break confidentiality. So it is, so your data when you fill out the form, is confidential and protected for over 7 years, to be frank. So this is, you should feel confident in this system. But starting with this effort, adding a citizenship question, which MALDEF and many other groups filed against and prevailed against the administration. So the citizenship question is not going to be asked on this census form. It is not there. So you do not have to worry about answering that. It is not there. But that just started this concerted avalanche of attempts to politicize this census in a way to really promote non-participation by American residents. And then the latest attempt to almost sabotage this census is the scheduling. So no one could have foreseen the COVID pandemic that has hit our country. But when the pandemic hit, the census was about to start sending out the forms, and then they had a schedule of when they were going to have the door knockers, the people non-response follow-up, asking you when, if you haven't filled out your form. Census requested an extension to the end of October. And then only a few weeks ago, and everyone had been planning for that, and including with that is a delay of apportionment data release and redistricting data release. It's a little into the weeds, but that's important because about a few weeks ago, the administration reversed the census's request for an extension of delay. And then now suddenly they're saying, no, we are going to stop counting at the end of this month, September. So 9 days from now. And so you can imagine anyone who has any interest in, in doing census and non-response follow-up outreach and community outreach, getting people to participate, suddenly have a month less time to do their campaign. As a council member, McCowan just said, we suddenly got, that's what she was referencing. We suddenly have less time. So, on top of that, the census, the administration is also just trying to they're also trying through executive order to try to say, no, non-citizen or undocumented immigrants should not be counted for apportionment, which is the allocation of seats to the U.S. House of Representatives. And so, MALDEF was actually literally starting oral arguments today on one of our pieces of litigation, and one of many by many groups across the nation, just fighting this administration's just multi-pronged attack on the census. And so Congressman, I guess it's a long story, but this is just, every attempt that has been done has been an attempt to discourage certain communities from participating, groups across the nation. I know representatives across the nation have been doing everything they can to fight and encourage participation. And all I can tell you at this point, anyone listening, please fill out your census form. That is the best way just to combat everything and just improve accuracy and whatever the results at the end of this process are.
Thank you, Stephen. We will be issuing a report specifically on the census and the 33rd Congressional District. That report shows that for every 1% undercount, the communities in this congressional district will lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this is a very significant issue. And again, we urge everybody to fill out the census. So question for you, Councilwoman Farrer in Malibu. I'm curious why you think there happens to be not a great response rate in Malibu currently.
It is vexing. I think we're in company with other cities, but cities with a range of demographics with a low response. I think Malibu is historically low. I think this year is even worse. As you know, we're dealing with back-to-back disasters, having had the Woolsey fire. We're coming up to the 2-year anniversary where we lost 10% of our housing stock. And many people are still out of their homes, living in temporary situations, some here in Malibu and some outside of Malibu. I'm not sure how many will rebuild. But that, I think, has had an effect, along with COVID. Meeting virtually, appointments at City Hall City Hall is conducting business by appointment and online. I think we're all struggling as cities to contact people and work with people as long as we're working remotely. And I honestly cannot tell you why our response is so low. I'd like to submit that it's not for lack of trying on the city's part. And like I said, we will continue that.
Thank you, Karen. And it is a particularly interesting issue. My congressional district, when you just look at the demographics, happens to be, in general, more highly educated. There are more people that have PhDs and college degrees than many other congressional districts. And yet our census response rate is below average. And so it's an issue we're trying to figure out as well. All these people should be getting emails and getting lots of information about the census. And for whatever reason, some of them are not filling out the census form. So we're trying to just make sure people know how important it is. The deadline is coming up, and just urge everybody to fill out the census form. And so, Kristen in Santa Monica, do you have any thoughts on how we can get Santa Monica to, I think you're a little closer to the average than some of the other places, but how do we make you all get there to average or hopefully above average?
So, God, I hope we get to above, at least above the percentage that we were at in 2010. We know we've likely grown since then. And so an undercount of what's currently about 3% compared to last time is significant. That's potentially 3,000 individuals. And so that's unacceptable. We have to do better. We don't have equity in telecommunications in Santa Monica. And I don't know if that's an issue that Malibu is facing too, but with COVID especially, connectivity is necessary to process the census. I'm going to have to check with the school board. But I was thinking that one interesting thing is we have approximately 2,500 students annually that rely on a free school lunch. We have about 1,500 households that receive funds for voucher programs, so Section 8, continuum of care, and home vouchers. Many of these households, I would guess, currently have access to internet connectivity for at-home distance learning. I am not 100% sure. I know the school district has been pushing out the census, but I'm curious, we're usually so strict about how that connectivity can be used, and it's really primarily for that student's education. But I'm curious if there is a way we could encourage or have the legal ability to encourage people to use that internet access to fill out their census, because those funds do directly impact the school district. So I'll have to look into that further. Maybe you guys know if that would be something that is allowed. And another thing I just had a question about, if anyone has an answer, if that's okay, is how to check if your answers have been accepted. So what I've struggled with personally is every time I go on, I can't see that I've completed it. It just gives me another opportunity to fill it out. And that may just be a unique problem. I might be doing something wrong, but I was wondering if anyone had an answer to that.
Thank you, Kristen, for your questions. On the first question about schools and connectivity, that's a great question. So my wife is a Torrance School Board member. So after this, I'm going to ask her that exact question and see if it can be done. It's also very important because there are some families where, in fact, it may be the high school student that is the most technologically proficient who, in fact, can fill out their census form for the entire family. So that's a very good point you raised. And then in terms of knowing if the census has accepted your answers, I don't know the answer to that. Stephen, do you know the answer to that?
Don't know. I don't know definitively. I believe there is a way. For those of you who filled it out with your code, when you fill out your census form, I believe you can be able to look it up, but I am not certain. I believe there is a way.
Thank you. We'll look into that and get back to you. And Stephen, can you remind people about how to, we got a question about anytime this happens, you have scammers out there, people who might want to engage identity theft. How do we protect people from being scammed from people who are not census takers and try to get their personal information?
Absolutely. So first of all, the census itself, be it online or in person, is never going to ask you for your much personal information. They might ask your address or your social security if you're filling it online, just to only verify they have the right person and address, so they don't double count somebody by accident. But they aren't going to ask you for any credit card information, anything billing. You do not get charged to fill out the census. So that's one way. Second, there's multiple ways to participate in the census. If you are not comfortable filling it out online, you can call the phone numbers, and you can also request a written form. So there are different ways to participate. And also, and the Census Bureau is also conducting non-response follow-up right now. So the door knockers, for example, they will go to the address if they don't have a record of a returned form. Actually, so answer them, and if they don't, and make sure they have the right credential, then they will not ask you for anything official. But I also just encourage you to answer them, because if they don't, after about three attempts at knocking at a door, if they're not, no one answers them and answers their census forms, they literally will go to your neighbor and ask how much information they can fill out. So not ideal, not as quality. And again, always fill out the form, because this is the best way for you to define yourself. I always also like to say the census is also our record of our history. These are our demographic history throughout time. So, we know, Latinos in California have almost doubled since 1990. Eight or more than doubled. Asians have almost doubled. So it's our demographic story of our state, and these stories extend down to your neighborhoods.
Thank you. And let me just follow up on that and remind people that the Census Bureau will never ask you for your social security number, anything on behalf of a political party, your bank account number, or your credit card numbers. So if anyone does that, then they're trying to scam you. Again, the census is a very short form. It took me about 10 minutes to fill out. It's about 12 questions, and it's only used by the Census Bureau and the Census Agency. It can't be shared with the private sector or with other agencies. So it is a very confidential process. And in fact, Census Bureau employees can go to prison if they violate these very strict rules and laws. So you should have every assurance that you can fill out the census and it will be kept confidential. So in terms of going forward, there's not that many days left. Actually, Stephen, what's the deadline right now if nothing has changed for when the census ends?
Currently the end of the month. So we have 9 days from today, which is September 21st.
So 9 days. And recently, if you just look at my congressional district, the statewide average is a little over 68%. We're at a little over 63%. So we're about 5% below the state average. We definitely need to do better. We did get the answer back, by the way. I have amazing staff. You can, in fact, check if your census report has been filled out. If you just call, again, this following phone number, 844-330-2020, and you can get the answer that way. Of course, it doesn't hurt if you want to submit your census form again. Again, it doesn't take very long. Councilwoman Farrer, in terms of resources, well, let me first of all, I'll take a step back. As I said before, in the CARES Act, we distributed a lot of money to the various cities and counties. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. The House of Representatives passed the HEROES Act, which has over $1 trillion that's going to be distributed to local cities, counties, and states. And again, that's going to be based on formulas done on the census. And my question to Councilwoman Farrer, it's a little, it's related to census, but also the pandemic. How is Malibu right now dealing with the pandemic, and do you have the resources you need to address the pandemic?
Well, our city budget is in decline, I think, as every city's is. I know Santa Monica's is. So we are all in an austerity mode. We're in a belt tightening mode. Our local businesses are in deep decline. I would say Malibu may have a slightly less effect than some of the other cities, because our primary source of revenue to the city is property tax, as opposed to sales tax. With a place like Santa Monica, I think you're getting hit much harder with TOT and sales tax. I'm sorry, can you tell me the rest of the question, Congressman?
Yes, just see if you had enough resources to address the pandemic from the CARES Act, but also hopefully the HEROES Act will get passed into law as well.
Well, what we have done last month, our council used $80,000 of the CARES Act funding for our day labor exchange. It's called the Malibu Labor Exchange. It's in the Civic Center. And we were able to pass along $80,000 to the exchange. And we also funded emergency backpacks for our seniors. We have a high concentration of senior citizens, and we are now able to hopefully make them more safe with emergency backpacks. We are always planning for the next disaster here.
Thank you. And Kristen, was the CARES Act funding helpful, and do you have enough resources in Santa Monica to address the pandemic?
The CARES Act funding was absolutely helpful. And as you said, it was about $1.14 million, and that allowed us to, at a minimum, keep 400 individuals in their household. And with the state extending the eviction moratorium through December, that also will help, of course. But, you know, like Councilwoman Farrer said, the COVID has been devastating to our community, much like it has been to communities around the country and around the world. But in Santa Monica, we rely very heavily on our sales tax, on our TOT, transit occupancy tax for folks that don't know. And as a community that has such a large tourist population on a regular basis, obviously that money really helps. They're talking about approximately $61 million annually that helps to fund a lot of our community programs, particularly those that are impacting lower income individuals, but also our children. I mean, this is where a lot of our community benefits come from. So, you know, I was looking at the numbers. It looks like in fiscal year 18-19, where we have the most recent data, we received approximately $38 million in federal funds. To say that we rely on that would be an understatement. We need the money to keep coming in to sustain our city. And the HEROES Act is really needed during these times. So I would say yes, we absolutely need the help, and it's part of what's driving us to, increased turnout on the census.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one last question to Stephen, and then we'll have closing comments. So I'm just curious, Stephen, clearly we're not going to hit 100% response rate. So let's say statewide we get, past 70%. What happens to the other 30%? How does the Census Bureau fill in those numbers?
So, I believe you're referring to the self-response rate, right, Congressmember?
Yes.
So what happens is, so if for households that do not fill out the form, the census looks at they create a list, and then they send the door knockers out and they knock. And they knock, and hopefully you answer the door and you answer your questions in person. And if you don't, they actually ask your neighbor, and they kind of have to guess. So obviously the further we go down the chain and from you actually filling out your own form, the quality of our data goes down. Let me actually ask you a question, Congressmember. So at the end of the day, though, if we have a bad census, we're going to have an undercount. When lines are eventually drawn for what as a demographer, I only know the data if it's in my spreadsheet. So I'm going to create districts that are about equal in population. Your new district will have equal population on paper, but you're going to have a lot more people to represent. So what does it mean to you as someone who has to do constituency service? Like you actually, you may have 750,000 people on paper, but you might have like 775,000 in reality. How does that affect you as a representative and the quality you can give your constituents?
That's a great question. So I have an amazing staff, but there's only a limited number of them. And if you increase caseloads, increase casework, then it's just going to slow down response rates. And it does make it more difficult to manage. So it will have effect actually for every member of Congress when that happens. And so it is very important, not just to make sure that our communities actually get the funding, but also that we don't have these very large districts that you represent. And when it's even larger, it just makes the representation even harder. So that's a very good point you make. Thank you again, everyone, for participating. We'll have closing comments now, and we'll start with Councilwoman Kristen McCowan from Santa Monica.
First, thank you so much, Congressman Lieu, for having us. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, representing Santa Monica. For any Santa Monicans watching, I would encourage you to fill out your census if you haven't already. Please encourage your neighbors and anyone else in town that you know to fill out their census. It's critical, and we will all benefit from your response. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Karen Farrer from Malibu.
Thank you, Congressman Lieu. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel and talk about our city of Malibu, and also to learn more with MALDEF and the city of Santa Monica. Santa Monica and Malibu are in the same school district. I would like to encourage anyone watching to please just take 5 to 10 minutes and fill out the census. It's very easy. It is confidential. It only helps all of us help you. And we really would like to be able to do the best job possible. And with your help, we're going to get there. We've got 9 days. I'd love to see an avalanche of responses in this following week. And anyone is welcome to contact me through the city of Malibu if they have any questions or comments about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Stephen, in your closing, if you could mention that website again, that'd be great.
Sure thing. So again, my2020census.gov or 2020census.gov, as Congressman said, they both work. Or the phone number of 844-330-2020 to complete by phone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak, Congressman. Census 2020 is in trouble. It is in serious danger. And anyone listening who who needs to fill out this form can help save it. This census has been the most litigated in our nation's history, and it has been under attack by an administration that is almost just trying to undermine it wherever it could by cutting short the time to count suddenly on community and city advocates, trying to get people to fill out their form, and also frankly truncating the time that the Census Bureau staff itself has to tabulate and create this data. The data release schedule was supposed to be pushed back, is also now back on by January 1st. So the quality of the data is in danger from multiple methods. So the way we can combat it at this point is please fill out the form. If you want your fair representation, if you want your fair dollars, and if you just want to just self-identify, just please be counted. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I want to thank all the wonderful participants today. And again, if we have an undercount, not only does it affect your community next year, it's going to affect your community for 10 years. And so this is a very serious issue. Please fill out your census. And if you know of anyone who has not done so yet, please urge them to do so. And with that, I'm going to conclude tonight's town hall. Thank you all for participating and have a great evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.